And we're back here on Canadian Football Countdown, CFL Free Agent Frenzy 2023, kicking off hour number 5. We've been live for 4 hours. We're halfway through our day here already. Some big signings have come in, many more still left on the board. And here to join us to talk about all the major news throughout the day is Robert Dalton from the Rouge Radio Podcast, who looks like he could be joining us live on location somewhere out in the field. We've got a reporter out in the field here. Daltz, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Not too bad. Thanks for having me. I think it's too soon to make a spy balloon joke that I'm not that on the scene, but we'll go with that. That I'm on location. I don't want anybody to know where I am. But
fair enough. Well, welcome here today. Happy to have you here on the program to chat about everything going on with CFL free agency. I know you've been keeping tabs on things throughout the day, throughout the past week with the negotiation window as well. Let's start off with getting your takes on what is the biggest bombshell to you that we've seen so far today?
I think with legal tampering, there really hasn't been anything any particular signing that really I would qualify as a bombshell. The closest thing would be that as of like 10 minutes ago, the Bombers are all of a sudden looking for a backup quarterback. Looks like Dakota Prukop is heading his way down to the USFL. I know Drew Brown had some quality snaps last year, but looks like the Bombers are going to be in the market for a backup quarterback, and the options are actually really few and far between now that guys like Dom Davis are signed, Caleb Evans are signed. So like I said, the options are few and far between. One thing I really have really surprised of is that Toronto, how manic they are in signing free agents. You know, as a reigning Grey Cup, as much as it hurts this Bomber fan to say that the reigning Grey Cup champions are not resting on their laurels. So I thought maybe that they would try to run it back with a good portion of their team, but no, they're going in there. Just recently making it official that Darius Pickett is going to solidify that linebacking core.
Yeah, the Argos mostly focused today on re-signing a lot of their own players from last season, but a couple additions like Darius Pickett. They made that big trade for Jordan Williams from BC. I guess let's get your guys' reactions out. We don't see trades too often in the CFL. This is an interesting one. One of the top linebackers for the BC Lions requesting a trade to go over to Toronto to be closer to home. I guess, at the same time, we can talk about how Dominic Rhymes requested a trade originally before they gave him a raise and a contract extension. So what do you think, Daltz? Is there trouble brewing in BC with, they've lost a couple of big pieces. Now you have a couple of guys that were requesting trades. Seems like it was a good year for them last year, but not sure where they're at currently in the offseason.
I think, I think there were I think there were low expectations for BC last year. I think everybody, myself included, kind of anticipated that with a first-year starter like Nathan Rourke. Outside of Brian Burnham, there were guys that didn't have the CFL pedigree of what the BC Lions receivers had last year. So I think they kind of overachieved. And I'm not taking anything away from them, but I don't think anybody really anticipated the success that they had offensively last year. So I think there was a lot of people that internally maybe they wanted to see what kind of money, what kind of raise that they got, and given how low of the financial windfall that Nathan Rourke was getting them, I think there were some players that kind of saw that, hey, Nathan Rourke's gone. We've got Vernon Adams, who's probably not going to get that much more than what he was when he was traded to BC last year. I'm seeing what the league market for wide receivers are. I want to get in on this, and in this day and age, we're not going to fault the players. I don't agree with the way he went about it when referring to Dominic Rhymes, requesting a trade. Could have just easily said, hey, this is what I want. What can you do to give it to me?
Now we just talked about moves the Argos have made. Looks like they've made another one here, bringing in American defensive lineman Thomas Costigan. Costigan, one of the youngest pieces that was a mainstay on a D-line last year, going over to the Toronto Argonauts there. So another little move for the Argos to make there, probably trying to offset, Jagarrett Davis going across to Hamilton, perhaps Shane Ray being a free agent there. Adam, let's go to you. What do you think on the Argos making a move here?
Yeah, you know what? I'm quite excited to see what the Argonauts are doing here. I mean, they look like they're rebuilding. They're getting younger again. I mean, I don't think they're going to sign Enoch Mwamba back just because of the signings that they've made already this offseason. So I'm kind of excited to see what the Argonauts are actually going to accomplish here in the next little bit. I mean, they've got McManus back under contract. They should be a pretty good team coming up here. What do you call it? Dalton, I got one question here for you, though. I think the biggest signing haul this season here was the Montreal Alouettes being signed back by the CFL, unfortunately. Just want your thoughts a little bit on what's all been going on in Montreal. And is this really going to affect them for signing free agents or not?
Signing free agents, no. Quality free agents, possibly. And the reason why is, the legal tampering period, it's been reported that Danny Machocha was not given the green light to sign a lot of players, or at least talk to a lot of players, specifically in regards to signing bonuses, which is very popular around this time. So I think they wanted to get a leg up with the legal tampering, but they were just handcuffed with what they weren't able to do. Now that the CFL has owned and Danny Mac has that green light, you'll see him a little bit more active in free agency, but the big fishes that you kind of want them to go after are gone. Unfortunately, as you already know, Harris, Eugene Lewis, another name that escapes me, they're gone. So they're going to have to recoup those kind of assets. And not to say that there aren't talented receivers left, or isn't talented defensive player left in free agent frenzy. It's almost like a downgrade based on what you're getting compared to what you've already lost. So it's unfortunate that other teams have already had a leg up on Montreal, but as I said before, it's not going to make him ineligible for signing new free agents. It's just the quality of free agents that they've already lost out on. It's going to make playing in Montreal a little bit difficult in the 2023 season.
I guess the only other question I really have for you, because I know you're a little bit of a Bomber fan.
A little bit, yeah.
Just a little bit, eh? Nevertheless, what do you think across the border? What is Saskatchewan up to? Do you think they're doing the right things by solidifying this offensive line? And is Winnipeg even caring about what Saskatchewan's up to? Because we seen last year that Saskatchewan kind of collapsed.
Honestly, the way that Winnipeg operates is kind of like the blueprints of what Calgary's was operating and how they operated, where they just operate within and they don't really focus on too much what other organizations. At least that's from my interpretation. As far as Saskatchewan, I don't know if the moves that they made are the right moves. Peter Gopper is a fantastic signing, but I don't know if that is the right move. But to answer your question, internally there's probably rumblings, but externally I don't really know if Winnipeg really cares what the other 8 teams, much less Saskatchewan's doing. But with Saskatchewan, they had to make moves, and if they didn't do anything on the offensive line, whether or not it actually made them worse, those are moves that you had to make, and to satisfy at least the 7 million so Rider Nation as to what they try to say. That's what they sound like. But that was my Bomber my Bomber nitpicking about Rider Nation being everywhere.
Yeah, they are everywhere. I'm gonna go back to Montreal. I find it interesting. Fajardo now with 1-year-old in the background has his opinions on Fajardo. I don't know if we can quite have that. You might have to bleep that out. That was baby talk for some swears there. But Fajardo going back with Moss, that seems insane with how things ended last year. But what's your thoughts on that?
Well, as far as I know, is that Moss was a huge fan of Fajardo. Now, whether or not he'll have success with Fajardo, he'll have a better offensive line than Fajardo had last year. The problem with Fajardo is he at the age where, can he go back to his 2019 form? I just don't know, and I don't know if he'll have the weapons available. I mean, right now it looks like Reggie White is back. He'll have I can't remember the names. The twin Tyson.
Tyson Philpott.
Yeah, Tyson Philpott. He'll have him back in the fold. William Stanback will hopefully be a little bit more healthier this year. So I mean, Cody Fajardo is somewhat set up for success in Montreal. It's just that whether or not Montreal will have Cody Fajardo set up for success, if that makes sense to you. But I don't think that it's more of a relationship between Fajardo and Jason Moss. I think that they both respect each other. Based on what I read, it has nothing to do with whether or not they get along. I think they get along fantastic. It is going to be kind of neat to see Jason Moss just freak out and say, "Pardon my French," and in reality, being in Quebec, it actually might be taken literal. But he's not going to be as mobile because I think that offensive line in Montreal is a little bit more stable. So it will be interesting to see. If I was Montreal, if I was Danny Mac, there's one receiver, and I'm not, within the last 10 minutes that I would actually go after. That's Rasheed Bailey. I think that he would solidify that intermediate that game that Fajardo really shined on in 2019. And if they're smart, that would be the move that I would make.
Yeah, Rasheed Bailey, 729 yards receiving, 9 touchdowns for him. Started the year slow, but finished it off really strong there as well. You were talking about Alouettes wide receivers. The biggest new addition for them being Greg Ellingson at the wide receiver position from the Bombers coming over there. One thing we have to, I think, talk about when we talk about free agency that we haven't touched on much yet today is the whole NFL negotiation window aspect of things as well, because we did an episode a couple of weeks ago talking about guys on NFL tryouts, and there was a long list of names, and Nathan Rourke was the big one, obviously, that everybody had their eyes on, and he's going south. There's a couple other guys, that have signed contracts down there. But it seems a lot of these guys have gone for workouts. We thought maybe they were going to go away, and then now it looks like they're coming back. The biggest ones on that list, probably Dalton Schoen in Winnipeg and Keon Schaefer-Baker in Saskatchewan, both sticking with their teams. Adam, I know you got a run here shortly, so I'm going to throw it to you here super quick first. What do you make of guys like this not sticking in the NFL and all of a sudden being back with their clubs for this year? How big of a move is that? Almost more so than a new signing.
Well, for me, I think it's a huge disappointment for those players. I mean, they made the opportunity. If they could make money in the NFL and play in the NFL and get good time in the NFL, that's worth anything to do that. So I feel bad for them that they didn't really get an opportunity or get even a contract offer to them. I mean, especially Schaefer-Baker, who had, I think it was 12 or 13 teams try him out. So yeah, kind of surprising. But that being said, their teams in the CFL, I mean, the Rough Riders need a number one receiver, as we heard from Steven just earlier on here. I still think that Schaefer-Baker could be that number one receiver. Plus, he's also Canadian, which really helps that Saskatchewan Rough Riders receiving core. That being said, on the other side, Dalton Schoen last year, I mean, what else can you say about him? He was the league rookie of the year for a reason. He was absolutely dominant every time he touched the football, and really, as most NFL teams said, really caught on to the wagon really quick in Canada. That could be one of the really dominant receivers in the league going forward. And if Winnipeg can get him long-term, look out. Winnipeg is going to be one of those teams with an already stacked receiving core that could really, really do some damage.
Dalt, what do you think on this?
I mean, at best, I could just say ditto. Just to stretch on that is that I'm completely amazed that Schaefer-Baker didn't have more workouts and didn't stick in the NFL. I thought I think he's got like almost the perfect size for NFL tight end almost. I mean, I can understand Dalton Schoen not sticking on, his size, his, as people have already mentioned, the waggle might be something that he has maybe taken advantage of in the CFL. What I'm looking forward to is, it's a pretty stacked receiving core, but how much of Dalton Schoen's success can he maintain? As he's not going to be the number one guy or even the number two guy in Winnipeg. Because of guys like Nick Dembski and Kenny Lawler, Dalton Schoen may actually be the number three guy in Winnipeg. And I mean, given the weapons, Carlton Agadosi, coming back hopefully from that freak injury, Drew Wolatarski. I don't know if you guys saw my premier photoshopping skills last week. Zach Collaros has got a couple of he's got a brand new set of toys that he's got to play with at his disposal, and we like to say that Dalton Schoen could probably reciprocate or duplicate his rookie year, but given the amount of the times or the amount of receivers that Zach Collaros has available to his disposal, Kenny Lawler probably would be the best bet to be their only 1,000-yard receiver, but I wouldn't say, if I'm a betting man, I'd say Schoen and maybe Dembski would be close to that 1,000 yards, as that ball is going to be spread very evenly in that receiving core in Winnipeg.
Adam, I know you got to run here. You got a busy work day for you. I appreciate you hopping in here throughout the day still as well. Where can people find you on Twitter or elsewhere if they want to get more of your free agency takes?
Well, they can find me at Adam Stewart 1. Usually either you'll see CFL stuff, you'll see a lot of senior hockey being talked about right now in Saskatchewan for me, and of course some farm stuff. So you can find me over at Adam Stewart 1 or Farmer in Saskatchewan, whichever one you're looking for. I know, pretty generic, but hey, that's the way we roll sometimes. And Trey, you keep that hat on. That's all I can say.
Will do, but you got to tell me my points in that pick'em when next time you see them.
Last time I checked, you were tied for fourth, which is ridiculous.
Let's go. No idea about Saskatchewan senior hockey, but somehow I'm winning the playoff pool. So let's go.
Resident betting expert Trey will take any opportunity to go in on a bracket challenge. All right, Adam, we'll let you go here. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll talk to you pretty regularly going forward, of course, on the Canadian Football Countdown, one of our mainstay hosts. All right, we'll say goodbye to Adam for now. And, let's continue talking about the moves that have been made so far in free agency. I believe I have our free agent tracker up to date. I mean, it's hard to stay on top of it fully. I'm going to scroll through some of the most recent transactions here. We talked about Thomas Costigan signing with on the defensive line with the Argos, Sean Bain at wide receiver for Saskatchewan, Caleb Evans at quarterback for Montreal as big one as their backup there to Cody Fajardo. A couple of offensive linemen there for the Riders, Philip Blake, Peter Godber. The Calgary Stampeders signing Julian Hauser to we don't know how long yet, but signing him to a contract for this upcoming season. Kind of the only big move the Stampeders have made thus far. I know we're going to talk a little more about them later on, but we did have some comments in the chat here. So let's go to you, Daltz. Dave Dickinson taking over as general manager this season for the Stampeders. Did you expect any different of an approach than what John Hufnagel has? And are you surprised by the lack of inactivity from them, but are you more surprised by the fact that they actually have activity today?
I am surprised, and I'm not. And I know that my co-host Tony Allen, who is a hardcore Calgary Stampeders fan, like when we did the memoriam for the Calgary Stampeders last year, is that we thought, one of the things that Calgary has done, like you said, is that they recruit more than they dip into the free agent pool, which is good. Except for Calgary, that motto it can only last for so long. Their last playoff victory was the Grey Cup in 2018. Since then, they've been one and done in the semifinals, and they haven't really looked particularly good doing it. So something had to change. And especially this year, Calgary's lost so many players. It almost seems like they've lost more than they've been accustomed to, that they were kind of expected to make a deep splash into the free agent pool. Julian Hauser, is a very hard-nosed type player that comes in and possibly replaces Sean Lemon and I can't pronounce his name, but whoever the Formula who signed with Toronto. I expect a couple of bigger. I'm not bigger fish, but I expect a couple more moves for Calgary, if not today, tomorrow. But that's just. I mean, that's just from an outsider perspective who may or may not be on location in Calgary at this point. I'll leave that to the discretion, up to the mind, up to people's imagination. But what I would do if I was Calgary is I would just be a little bit more inactive or a little bit more active in free agent, because you just kind of have to. You just can't rely on the recruiting process sometimes. So to answer your question, am I surprised that they're not as active? Yes, because of the reasons I just laid out, but I'm also not surprised because that just seems to be their MO. And before Ryan comes onto the program, I'll just say that there's no way that Calgary goes 18-0 this year. No way.
Or watch This Is the Year It Finally Happens. Trey, what do you think about where we're at? We're halfway through the day right now. We're a bit over halfway through the day here on Free Agent Frenzy. We've seen some moves come in. Are you impressed with what we've seen done so far? Are you waiting for more big names to drop here? Let's check in with you and see where you're at here halfway through the day.
Yeah, I think that the teams that traditionally make moves and needed to make moves have. And, I think there's a lot of teams that we got a lot of the news over the last week because of the tampering period. And I still don't know how the Bombers got Lawler. Like I'm going to be scratching my head for years, especially if he's getting that big touchdown catch in Grey Cup in Hamilton this year. I'm going to be like, well, thank God for him, but how did we manage that? But other than that, the teams are doing what they need to do. I think Hamilton's doing great now, having the Grey Cup and getting Bo. They signed Bo to the full 4 years? No, 3 years, right? 3 years. I don't know if you got him for 3, but they got him for this. I think he'll be decent this year, probably next year. They're taking full advantage of that. Ottawa looks like, knock on wood, might win a home game this year. Toronto looks decent. Montreal, I don't want to talk about Montreal until we actually see what happens there. And then the West is always going to be the West, right? Calgary being quiet might be more scary than anything. It's like, what do they have in the pipeline that we don't know about, right? And things of that nature. And so my real big question mark in the West is Saskatchewan. And for Adam's sake, I hope he doesn't have another year that he had to live through like last year. But at the same time, there's not a lot of room for Saskatchewan to sneak through, because I think Winnipeg and BC are still going to be the big dogs, and Calgary you can never count out. And again, you can't count out Chris Jones in Edmonton, right? So, man, it needs to be June, right? That's always said, like, whatever that CFL motto is it June yet? Like, right now, the weather's getting nice. Where's football, man? And the Super Bowl just ended. I'm not watching USFL. So I need football, man.
We can watch in March when the XFL eventually folds again.
Yeah, pretty much. And then you'll never hear The Rock talk about it again. He's like, I actually wasn't involved, or he'll shut it down like he did with Warner Brothers, man. Like, oh my God.
Well, that's something that's obviously coming up in conversations a lot now, too, is players exploring these other leagues also. We just had to go to Prukop is going to go sign in the USFL instead. Probably the biggest question mark is, what is McLeod Bethel Thompson going to do? Is he going to sign USFL, XFL, or come back to the Argos? How much of an impact do you think, Daltz, that these additional leagues popping up are having on free agency decisions for some of these guys?
I'd love to say, see, the talent level sometimes based, the players that actually are going towards the USFL or the XFL, those type of players are replaceable. So, they're taking guys who have experience in the CFL, and as much as I'd like to have them because they are character guys, it's not affecting the CFL as much as I think a lot of naysayers would have you to believe, because there's always that next guy coming up, right? So it's like if you're talking, let's say, a receiver, like a fourth receiver on a CFL, I don't know if any team is going to miss that fourth check down receiver, because they probably already have that similar player on their practice roster or on their suspended list or what have you, and then they already have that next guy up to replace that said player. If we're talking starting quarterback going down to those leagues, then we're having this conversation about how serious we need to take those two leagues. But as of now, I'm not really concerned with the XFL or the USFL. And to be honest, a league that only operates during the spring in the XFL and a league that has folded twice, I'm not too sure how much concern a lot of people should have with that league.
Wrong button. My only worry with the XFL was because of The Rock, because he's a name, and I have a 7-year-old kid who plays Fortnite, and that's the only reason why he knows The Rock, right? So you know what I mean? There's, and then now it opens up his movies, and if my kid found out that The Rock owns a football league, well, that was my only worry, was The Rock being involved in it. But I kind of agreed too, until that quarterback. I thought Bo might be the guy where The Rock, The Rock knows about the CFL. Throw money at a guy like that, Bo or Bethel Thompson, get that name down there, so something they can advertise, right? Grey Cup champion Bethel Thompson now in the XFL, but until that actually happens, they don't have anything, right? They just got a bunch of guys who aren't good enough for the CFL or the NFL trying to find a spot, right? So it'll be interesting to see. There was talk. I think Chris Jones said he found it tough, but I mean, Chris Jones is gonna say crap anyway, right? So, but Mike or Ryan, you got your first taste of NFL this year, really, being a fan. Ryan, what do you think about these spring leagues, and more 4-down football for you to not watch?
Well, I don't know. I might check out a bit of it here and there, but I did actually check out a little bit of the USFL when it came back last season. I was intrigued by it. I like seeing leagues where the guys aren't making $100 million, where they're actually playing hard for their jobs and stuff like that. So, more football is better football, right? The more football there is, it'll mean some of the talent is dispersed, but there means there could be an influx of talent from the USFL or XFL coming to the CFL one of these days as well. So I am very excited. I'm excited to see how it all works out. And you know what? They've tried so many times. I'll be positive here. I hope they succeed one of these times with bringing back the XFL here. Dalton, I know we're almost out of time here with you today. We got to let you go here shortly. So thanks for taking the time to join us here. I guess quickly, what are you watching next coming forward here in CFL free agency? What's the big name you're looking to see where they go? And then also tell everybody where they can find your podcast and everything else you've got going on.
Yeah, if we want to keep this Bomber related, I think they really need to get that defensive tackle position solidified. Maybe get a big name. When I say a big name, the name of Tim Bonner, the name of Mike Moore, who was just released by Montreal last week or a couple of days ago. Those are names that I kind of expect to be added to Kyle Walter's speed dial anytime soon. The biggest name that really stands out there, and I'm really surprised that we haven't really heard anything, is Darnell Sankey, who's eventually going to leave Saskatchewan. The team I kind of hear is Calgary, going back to Calgary, as it kind of makes sense. They have the holes there. They have the money available. That makes sense, and possibly maybe even Montreal. They might have that option available for Darnell Sankey, but that's my prediction. But as far as where you can find me, obviously, if you see me now, you probably know where you can find myself. That's at Rouge Dalton podcast at Rouge Radio. Tony and I are going to get dust off the old mic next week to go through all the free agent frenzy signings, talk about possibly the USFL and the XFL. The podcast is available through any of your podcast applications. TuneIn, iHeartRadio, Google Play, Apple, as well as on YouTube, as we're we're doing the same way thing you guys are doing. We're doing everything through video and having everything on live stream on YouTube. And as well as I've got a couple more trade trees to come up with that should be released on YouTube, even a couple of old ones that I'm going to redo because I've been fact checked. So that'll be due in a couple of days.
Yes, make sure to check that out, everybody. And final super quick question for you, probably the most important one here today. It's currently 1 degree Celsius in Winnipeg. You're outside. I see a toque on. I see a jacket. Are the jorts on display?
I knew you were going to ask that. No, the jorts are put away until it's consistent plus degree territory in Winnipeg. I saw the weather forecast for Thursday. It's going to be a low of -19 and a high of -12. So I think it's safe to say that the jorts will be in storage until mid-March.
Right on. Well, of course, most important time of the year when you break those out. So we look forward to that. We look forward to everything you've got going on with your podcast. Thanks again for taking the time to join us. We'll let you go here and enjoy the rest of your day and enjoy the rest of the CFL Free Agency.
Will do. Thanks for having me on, guys.
All right, as we say goodbye to Robert Dalton from Rouge Radio, we have another guest waiting in the wing here, ready to go with us for the next hour. I believe he's here to join us. So let's bring him in from the Turf District over in Edmonton. It's the great Andrew Hoskins is here. Andrew, how are you doing today?
Hello. Thanks for having me on, guys. I appreciate it.
Yes.
I'm doing okay. I'm actually super excited for free agency. I know, right? Like it's, I have a reason to be excited. This is we don't always get that here. So right now, we're excited. Yeah.
It's the most exciting time in the CFL season.
Yeah, exactly. Like what's a salary cap? We're fine. Let's just forget it. Let's bring everybody in and make it all happen. I mean, hey, we've had a couple of years where we haven't been able to cheer it all. So I'll take all the good things that are happening today.
Yes, well, we'll get into it here in a second. I'll pull up the free agency tracker. I'm just sorting something out here with it. But the Elks have been pretty busy here, and we expected that much after how things ended last season for them. Most notably, it seems like they're overhauling the entire wide receiver core. Eugene Lewis, Kyron Moore, Stephen Dunbar, the biggest names coming in there. What do you think of what the Elks have done so far at the position?
Well, so far I'm pretty happy. Originally, when we heard that Kenny Lawler would be headed back to Winnipeg, which is great for you guys, and an amazing receiver, right? But arguably, when you talk about Kenny Lawler going, you're thinking, okay, he's number 1 or 2 in the league as far as the receiver is concerned. I know Dalton Schoen obviously is up there as well, but the other one that you would come to mind is Eugene Lewis. So originally, when we thought he was leaving and it was only Stephen Dunbar coming in, we we're thinking, okay, well, they're going to put some money somewhere else. And then Eugene Lewis comes up. And if you're replacing Lawler and what looks probably like Darrell Walker with Eugene Lewis and Stephen Dunbar, that's a pretty good trade-off. I'm not really upset about that. I think they're trying new things, and another year of Corndog getting some practice and getting to where he needs to be. I think those are good steps.
Well, yeah. you mentioned Corndog, and are you content with the receiving core or the quarterbacks in that room right now?
I am at this moment. And the reason that I am is because we saw, especially near the end of last season, Taylor Cornelius taking some steps forward, and he wasn't throwing the fourth quarter interception like he was before, which was, I mean, for the first probably 10 games he played, it was almost a guarantee. You'd be like, late third quarter, beginning of fourth quarter, there's going to be some horrible interception that is going to destroy the team. And as we got into the latter 9 games of last year, that really seemed to clean up. And he started to use his feet a lot more, which we didn't really know he could run like that. But the guy runs like a gazelle. Might as well let him run out the ball. So I think he's shown some really good development under Jarius Jackson. And I can see where they felt comfortable enough to give him the extension. So I'm okay with that. And of course, we have Trey Ford waiting in the wings, who's still learning, who had moments, flashes of brilliance last year too. So I'm okay with where it is right now. I understand we're still growing. I don't want to go so far as to be like, yeah, well, that was, Eugene Lewis is the last piece we needed, and we'll see you all suckers. Like, that's not going to happen. But I feel like we're taking the steps in the right way forward from where we were 2-3 years ago, where it looked like we had all the talent on the team and they couldn't do anything. Right. So I'm quite happy with that.
Was it last year that the Elks in free agency, they had focused on the wide receiver slot also, but wasn't it last year where they had brought in the likes of Manny Arsenault, Caleb Hawley, and Darius Bowman, right? And we looked at it on free agency as what is the Chris Jones madhouse we're looking at here?
Yeah, which then, of course, a bunch of those didn't even get to camp, right? Like Darius Bowman never got there. He retired as an Elk, which is great. And obviously Manny played a role. The other part that I really like with, and Manny being back this year, is you look at that leadership style, right? I think Manny is now another coach on the field and off the field, which had a big impact last year when you look at guys like Dylan Mitchell, and how he really kind of came out and had a bit of a coming out party at the end of last year. He's taking another step forward. He's still got the coaching on the sidelines, but we know with the coaching cap, you kind of got to have those guys that can be player coaches on and off the field. That's where Manny fits in. And so I think that there's a really big help for them right now to have those guys to help them through. Obviously Eugene Lewis has been in the league for a bit now. So I believe this is his 4th year. Is that right? You probably know more than I do, Ryan. So he's got some experience. Kyron Moore has had a bit of experience, and he's had experience in the Chris Jones system. Stephen Dunbar has only been in for a couple of years. So they have that balance of guys that know what they're doing, guys that can be kind of those coaches, and then guys that are your speedster guys that have been showing up and doing new things. So I think that's a really good balance. And I know we'll talk about other parts of the team, but right now I quite like what they've done with the receiving core, and being that you can have Cornelius on a smaller contract as far as a quarterback is concerned, and Trey Ford, who is a legitimate backup at a rookie contract, you have the dollars to spend. So I think it's probably a good move to get that sorted out.
I mean, we have some time here with you. We have you for the full hour here, I believe, so we can go through it with the Elks a little more methodically than we can in a shorter time span. So I think it makes sense to start off with taking a look at the guys they brought back from last season. I'll scroll through it here on the screen here, and I want to know who jumps out to you as a key piece that they managed to bring back for another season here. I mean, a couple of guys at the running back position, rookies on the practice roster there. Manny Arsenault, you already touched on him a little bit, being brought back at wide receiver. A couple of guys in the offensive line, defensive line.
Before we go too far on the offensive line there, I think Martez Ivy is one that is a sneaky good re-signing. And I only say that because he was getting better as the season went on as well at that tackle position. And especially with Tony Washington retiring, and we're always trying to find those young offensive tackles, American offensive tackles. I think he could play a role this year. So I did actually like that re-signing. The other guys don't know as much about, of course, but for sure, Ivy does have a little bit of a role there for sure.
Then we move on to the defensive side here. Jake Ceresna, Christian Rector, the big two on the defensive line. A defensive back, you've got Ed Gainey, Aaron Grimes, Raphael Leonard being brought back there as well. And on special teams, Sergio Castillo, the big name, being brought back at kicker there. Anybody on the defense or special teams side that's back for another season that's really key here to you?
Well, you cannot talk about the Elks without talking about the job that they've done without talking about getting Jake Ceresna back. He's a monster in the middle of the line. I was so excited to see him back on the team, and he wants to be here and make a difference, and he excels in Chris Jones' system. So I thought that's massive. It's nice to have the re-signings with like Ed Gainey and Grimes, because again, then you've got that leadership, that veteran guy in the defensive backfield. I'll be curious to see how Grimes is this year, because he basically was off the entirety of last year with an injury, and he is another year older. So not that, I mean, older football terms, I understand, says I, being way older than him, but I do think that he could, if nothing else, he does provide that leadership in the background, but we'll see how he does when he's on the field and having to keep up with some of these younger dudes.
Yeah, for sure. One of those interesting players that's been, didn't play last season due to injury, much like a Kwaku Boateng, who you're very familiar with over in Edmonton, going from Ottawa to Hamilton.
I think that's a huge signing for Hamilton. Now, I understand I am completely biased in the fact that I do love Kwaku, and he's a great guy in the community. But I still, to this day, will say he has one of the quickest off the line moves that I have seen, and I've seen a lot of defensive linemen play. You get him paired with a guy like Teddy Laurent or Dylan Wynn. Boy, that's going to open up some channels for him, and I think he's going to have a big year, and a Canadian at that. So I think that's a great signing for Hamilton.
I want to ask a quick question here about Ante Milanovic-Litre. Gets re-signed, then gets cut. What's your thoughts on the move there by Chris Jones and the running back?
Yeah, not my favorite move when you have a re-sign and then cut. Now, the one thing I guess I will say is that I appreciate the fact that at least they cut him right before free agency. So it wasn't like he got to camp and then got cut. He does have an ability to get onto another team earlier. It was a bit of a surprise, but what I think is happening is, and my guess, I don't know this for sure, my guess is that they have some young American running back that they want to bring into the system. And we already know we've got Kevin Brown, and we already know that he's going to likely be the starter on day one. You have to think that they're bringing in somebody else. And they also released Malik Tyne at the same time. So it's like they just moved away from the Canadian at the running back position, and they're just going to go American there. And I think that was the big indicator for me that that's what they have in the plan, but I don't know who that is yet. But I'm guessing that that's what the deal is. They can probably get cheaper that way with an American running back.
James Wilder is also still under contract, it seems, at the running back position. He missed most of the last season due to injury, was the starter there for a couple of years before that. I mean, it seems like Kevin Brown's the guy going forward here. I would hope so after the way we saw him play down the stretch last season. But where do you think Wilder factors into things here at the running back spot?
Yeah, all of our fantasy rosters want Kevin Brown to play again. That's a guaranteed point right there. But James Wilder, he was dealing with a neck injury last year, and we don't know where he is in the recovery from that. I don't know. I don't know where he actually ends up. I have a feeling that he either leaves the game or is on long-term injury reserve, because the last I had talked to him, he was still, they had to wait for different swelling to go down and all those types of things before he could even see a doctor to try and make some plans. And so there isn't really there wasn't a short-term solution to this issue. So, of course, the danger would be if he decided to play and then got hit the wrong way, that would really be bad. So, my guess is that we don't see James Wilder this year, which is unfortunate. I'd love to have him in the community because he's an amazing, energetic dude in the community. But I also don't want him to jump on a field and get hurt. So, I'm guessing that he is not a factor once we get to training camp.
That's kind of what I was expecting as well. A guy that's still under contract, but at the same time, will he be by the time we hit the field when the season starts there for them? Let's go over to the subtraction side here for next and see who the Elks are going to be without that was under contract from last season. But first, a couple of breaking news signings to mention here. The BC Lions have signed offensive lineman Chris Schluger spent the last couple of years with the Montreal Alouettes. And speaking of the Alouettes, looks like they've restructured the contract of quarterback Davis Alexander to sign him to a one-year contract extension. The quarterback who, as of 12 hours ago, was the only one on the roster for the team before they brought in Cody Fajardo and Caleb Evans there as well. So he'll be under contract through 2024. But
what do you guys actually think? Can we just talk about that for just a second? What do you guys think of that combo in Montreal? I was I can't say I was surprised. On the other hand, when it was those two together, I thought, you know what, that's actually kind of an interesting combo of Fajardo and Evans. If you use them the right way in the right situations, I think that could be a decent combo, especially with Fajardo actually more likely to have a better O-line in Montreal.
We've touched on Fajardo a bit already, I think, but I don't know if we've had your take on Caleb Evans coming in as a backup, Trey. What do you think of this dynamic duo, if you can call it that, in Montreal?
Man, at this point, I don't know. I just hope the off-field stuff doesn't affect the on-field stuff more than it already has. And actually, when we had Stephen on from Piffles, Stefan on, he made a point that like, maybe Fajardo getting out of the light in Saskatchewan, where the only thing in Regina is the Rough Riders. Now he goes to Montreal, where you got the Habs, you got a soccer team, you got a bunch of stuff other going on. He's not going to be the main focal point. I think that might be good for him. I just interested in to know how him and Moss are going to get along. But now adding Caleb Evans into that, you need more than the quarterbacks, and unfortunately, I don't know what else they have. You got two decent guys. I'm sure they'll have passing yards, but outside of that, a lot of players are leaving, and they're the one team that hasn't been able to keep up to like the other three teams in the East. So, oh man, I was so high on Montreal going into last year, and then VA's gone, and everything else is gone, and Gary Stern looked like the owner of the future, and everything seemed to be going right. And now if you told me that everything would blow up within a calendar year, I wouldn't have believed you, right? It's ridiculous, but I hope that they put something together, that duo. Like, I don't know. Like, I made the joke last week before it was official. Who do you hate more, Dane Evans or Fajardo? Because that's whoever you hate more, you send them to Montreal, right? And poor Fajardo is the one ended up there. And I actually thought Dane might end up there too, but I don't know with Caleb Evans there now. You're not going to. Where does Dane Evans go? That's my bigger question, because I only had him maybe backup for Montreal. Now, where the heck does he go? Toronto, if Bethel Thompson goes down south or retires? Like, I have no idea, right? That's the bigger question I have about the East.
I agree. Is Dane? Yeah, does Dane end up in Toronto, or does Dane even is he backing up Harris in Saskatchewan? Maybe. Like, I mean, it's all high inflection question mark. I have no idea, but I do know that. You were talking about with Montreal and Caleb Evans coming in there. I'm not throwing Caleb Evans in there to throw 50-yard bombs. Like that's not what he's really good at. But you have to line up at the 2 and push it over the line. Fajardo might be really good at getting them down to the 5-yard line, and then Caleb Evans can take over and get it in there, like they were doing with Dominic Davis before, right? So. I don't know. I'm curious how that combo, and at least they still have Stanback too, right? So they do have some threat of running on a number of levels. So I think it could be an interesting combo. I agree with you. I'm not sure. Obviously, it wasn't as bad with Jason Moss as we thought, because he's still joining a team where Moss is. But yeah, it's an interesting combo. Sorry to derail the Elks talk, but as you're talking about Montreal, that kind of raised that question for me.
No, we're bouncing around all day long here. I mean, as things come in, we bounce around back and forth. We're trying to cover everything as it goes around. So good to jump in and chat about that as well. It also gave me some time to update our free agent tracker. Jordan in the chat pointing out I had a couple running backs listed as Canadian there for the Elks, Trayon Gray and Lexington Thomas, who are actually Americans. So like you were saying earlier, maybe that's position the team's going American. So we will get that corrected on the chart, put it back up here. and go back to taking a look at the subtractions for the team. I mean, Milanovic-Litre, we discussed that one already. At wide receiver, there's some big pieces on the way in that we've talked about and we'll discuss more, but there's also a couple big pieces on the way out. Kenny Lawler on the way out and Darrell Walker also. This is a guy who has, been synonymous with wide receivers in Edmonton. I know he went to Toronto for a bit there, but Darrell Walker, you think of him, you think of Edmonton wide receiver. Are you surprised they couldn't get it done to bring either of these guys back here? Or do you think it's a case where the team maybe didn't want to bring them back for another season here?
Well, I think with Kenny Lawler that they did want to get him back. And I know they did have lots of conversations with him. So I know that was, that was on their list. And I think when they thought, well, it doesn't look like we can get this done the way we want, then they were talking to Gino. So my guess is that's kind of how that fell down. As far as Darrell Walker is concerned, I think the biggest thing is, and you can look on the chart there, he's age 32. And is he that much different than Stephen Dunbar Jr., who probably comes at about the same cost, maybe a little less, depending on what Walker is asking for, and younger, right? So I think that might have been a bit of the direction is can we get somebody who is similar and Walker the last 2 years has not been the Walker of 2015, 2016. Mm-hmm. So can we find a guy that fills that same role and maybe does it a bit better? Maybe a younger guy who's learning a little bit, maybe a guy who can come in and learn from Manny and kind of, expand. I think they might have actually made that decision beforehand to be like, let's see if we can find that younger guy. And I think they did in Dunbar.
Another signing to announce that just came in, defensive back Jamal Roll, going from the Hamilton Tiger Cats to the Montreal Alouettes. So we've talked a lot about the ownership situation there for Montreal and, the focus on the offense, but they're making a couple of key moves on the defensive side there also. So I don't know who in the boardroom is the one signing off on these moves necessarily right now. Maybe it's Randy Ambrosie himself. Probably not, but another move there for the Alouettes. We'll take another look here at some more of the subtractions for the Edmonton Elks. Tony Washington, he's been in the league since 2011, officially retiring from the CFL. Pretty good career there for him.
Absolutely.
Along the defensive line here, Tim Bonner's a free agent. McKenna Henry, these are S.A. Mirabre. These are all guys that have played, meaningful pieces over the past little bit here. Linebacker, Dion Lacey, Toby Antigua, seemingly two of the biggest names on that list, I would say. Defensive back, your favorite guy here, Trey, Deron Carter, subtraction. Do we see him landing anywhere, or is the football career officially over?
Oh, I think the football career is over. I think he's going to coach somewhere or carry on in another role somewhere. But he was always nice to us on the sidelines as fans, like when we were. You'd hey Deron and you chat with you or whatever, but I mean, yeah, he's not a safety. And so I mean, we have Scott Hutter, who's Canadian, and he's an amazing safety. So I wasn't upset by that move. Let's just put it that way. As going back a little bit though, you were talking like linebacker as well. It's like, well, Dion Lacey didn't really play that much. Trey Watson actually didn't play that much. The only one on there that was a little bit of a surprise to me was Brady Sheldon. Now, he only had played a few games, but I thought he did make an impact on that linebacking core. But the hope there is that Niles Morgan is healthy for the year and he makes a huge difference in the linebackers. And on the offensive line, Steven Nielsen was a bit of a surprise for me. So I'm kind of curious as to where we're going to have our global player from. So, because right now we only have a kicker. So I don't know if there's some plan in that for when the global draft comes, because we don't have much in the way of a global player. So that should be rather interesting for this year. Just something of note.
Yeah, that's, we talked about free agency. There's still the Canadian draft. There's still the global draft. There's the supplemental draft, whatever that is to come yet. I never really understand the ins and outs of that, if I'm being honest.
That's fair. Yeah, I don't either. It's like, oh, we got another guy. Great. Okay.
Someone's great grandmother was Canadian, so they're fine now. That's what it seems to be.
Yeah, it's like a side note or something, but you have to give up a draft pick to get them, and that's why we have guys like Jamin Pelly, right? We picked him up in the supplemental draft last year, and that guy is set up. Now, granted, he did declare himself for the NFL draft, but if he's still here, that guy's set up to have a monster year in his second year because he's a big dude. So they're promoting him like crazy. The team is, so I'm sure hope that means he's going to be here, and then have him and as a Canadian and Serezna up the middle, with now AC Leonard on one wing for sure. Yeah, that could be a lot of oomph coming in through the back file, through this defensive line. I mean, yeah.
No, because I believe the Waller-Toski from the Bombers was a supplement draft pickup too, and it's only because his mom's Canadian or something, so they give it. So it's a weird thing, but whatever expands the game. Actually, I was going to talk about AC Leonard because I feel like just our previous show before him going from signing in Edmonton, I said that's a guy I would tell Winnipeg to go get into the fold. What's your thoughts on him now going from one green team to the other?
Sorry, you're talking with Kyron Moore? I was reading something.
AC Leonard. Sorry,
AC Leonard. Yeah. AC Leonard, I mean, one of the things that we needed to improve this year was the rush ends. Like we needed to get some improvement in there. I think that was kind of a surprise that he came free, and we already know he excels in Jones's defensive system. So I was very happy to get him here. I just hope that he has learned to not get upset when they tell him to do a drug test. That's my only thing would be worried about. But other than that, I mean, hey, he can, ever since they turned him from a fullback / slot receiver to a defensive end, the guy's been a monster. So I'm not upset about that at all.
I have one more. Sorry, I have one more because I'm a lifelong Bomber fan, and I enjoyed the years of Chris Jones being in Saskatchewan and always getting fined for cheating and this and that and the whole thing. How is it to have your fan or your team be a Chris Jones team? Like, how is it actually being a fan of that?
Well, okay, so here's the thing: is that I was a fan of it when he was here in 2014 and 15, right? And then he left, and I hated his guts because he left. I don't think he left the right way. I don't think he did it properly by the team and by the fans. And I get it for himself, makes sense. But for me, that was a little upsetting. And then I was quite happy for him to tank Saskatchewan. You keep having all these issues, and that's great, and that type of thing. I think one of the differences here this time around, and now when they hired him, it wasn't my favorite choice because I understood the reasoning that he could do head coach and GM. And my worry was that, another offer comes up and away he goes. But having G-Roy here as the assistant GM makes that a little bit better. Having Victor as the president makes it a little bit better because there is no room for any of those. Don't make that move that's going to make us look bad. Do you know what I mean? Like I think they've actually there's a good balance there. So you don't get those issues as much. And last year we really didn't see any of the main issue that people had with Chris Jones last year was, man, can he just have a lineup? Because it just every guy comes in and goes out and comes in and goes out. But they were using last year, and we knew this at the beginning, as basically a full year training camp to find those guys and stick them in place. And then they had more injuries than we have seen in a long time in one team. And so I remember talking to him about that as we were getting to the Labor Day game. And even Coach Jones was like, yeah, like I've never seen injuries like this. Like I don't, he goes, I want to have a stable lineup, and I think we have the guys, but they keep getting hurt. Like there's just nothing. Like how do we do that? So I think he kind of has turned the corner on that, where you're not getting as much of the off-field stuff that is or the poor decisions for how you manage people on the field. And so now I'm a little more of a believer especially after talking to him a couple of times. You're like, okay, yeah, you do have a plan, and I may not like everything that you do, but any head coach, you're not going to like everything he does. You'd be like, yeah, okay, that's good. And this is just the way you manage it. And as long as we get towards having some success, great.
And the turtleneck is legendary, right?
Absolutely. Well, yeah. I mean, we all want the black turtleneck. I mean, that's I gotta try and get one of those.
Yeah, you gotta get some branded ones with the logo on it. Come
right?
On,
yeah, I know. I gotta really work on. Actually, that's a great idea. I should do that. Just get the turf district and then have a black like that stretchy turtleneck. It'll be perfect. Okay.
I'll send you my mailing address for all royalty fees at this point.
Afterwards. I'll happily give you the royalty fee of whatever the percentage of 0 is. I'm happy to give it to you. That's not a problem. Yeah.
We're going to take a break in a couple of minutes here just to reset things near the top of the hour. But let's close out the Elks talk, and then when we come back, we'll take a look at some of the stuff from around the league as well. Some big name signings. We talked about the 3 at wide receiver, Eugene Lewis, Stephen Dunbar, Kyron Moore. Talked about AC Leonard coming in on the defensive line. At linebacker, Eli Menser, Kevin Francis seemed to be additions. Loucheiz Purifoy was let go by the BC Lions. That, to me, is a massive one at defensive back. And Ken in the YouTube chat letting us know the Elks just announced the signing of Josiah St. John on the offensive line that we have not updated the free agent tracker with here. I guess, what are you happy with what the Elks have done so far overall in free agency, and kind of what do you see as their focus being moving forward throughout the rest of the day and the coming weeks here?
I'm happy with the positions that they've worked on. They've worked on getting some DB help a little bit with when you talk about Loucheiz Purifoy, big name. They've worked on some of the rush ends like AC Leonard, which is what they needed. They've obviously overhauled the receiving core, but tried to match, level for guys coming in. So I'm okay with that. If there was one question mark that I had, it was a global player, and B, and probably more importantly, who else is coming in on the offensive line, because although getting better, it was still weak. And I don't think Josiah St. John is a guy that's going to, bump out any of our starters on the offensive line at this particular moment. We really need to see, Tomas Jack Cardilla have a move forward year. Is he ready to take on that starting guard role? I think those are the things that I have a bit of question mark on. So I'll be curious to know what they do as far as bringing in somebody on that side. That would be where I'd hope the next bit of work would be is in that area. I did see in the chat too, they were talking about adding a linebacker because we have Morgan, McConzo, Francis. But we also on the linebacker side, we can't forget Adam Konar, and he had a big year last year. Like, he was all over the field. So, Konar is still in there. Apollon is still around, who played some games last year, and Matthew Thomas is there, who was almost like for a while there, they played a bit of a 3-4 defense, and Matthew Thomas was that outside linebacker, and he, definitely disturbed in the backfield. So I don't know that they need a ton more, depending on how they're going to set up if they're going to do that balance of 4-3 and 3-4. But I don't think they need a ton more on the linebacker side of things.
All right, we're going to take a quick 2-minute break here. You'll see the "We'll be right back" screen pop up. We will put some music on, be back in about 3 minutes here. Then we'll get to your take, Andrew, on some of the other things going on around the CFL, because we have you here for about another 20 minutes or so, correct? Or
fantastic. Yes, we're all good to go.
Awesome. As we kick off hour number 6 here on Canadian Football Countdown, CFL Free Agent Frenzy. We'll be back in a couple of minutes. Stay tuned.